Now, after lunchtime, I generally don't have kind of like this plummet of like cognitive performance that a lot of people have if they just like overly eat and like, starchy carbs or sugars, which a lot of people do at lunchtime. But sometimes around like 3 o'clock, like I'll feel a little bit of a lag and I'm like, you know what, I could use a little bit of a pick me up where I'll just take like a little, like, tiny shot of the KE4, which I don't remember the measurements, but I want to say it's like what you guys recommend on the bottle. Is it 5 milliliters or maybe 10 milliliters?
1 or 2 capfuls would be what you would be taking. Yeah.
That's what I do. And then again, I just chase it with a little bit of like Topo Chico or sparkling water. And for me, like it is without, like every single time it is always effective in helping just to give me kind of that little boost and edge that I need to kind of just crank out another, 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours of like deep work in the afternoon, which prior to kind of like starting that routine, I didn't have as easily, or back in the day, it would be like, that 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock cup of coffee, which was awful because of how it would disrupt my sleep. It was so bad, but I don't get that disruption of sleep, obviously, with ketone esters. I really get better sleep. And then it's indicative of objective measurement. Like you mentioned earlier, I'll look at my Oura Ring scores and the days that I do take ketone esters, which is not every day. I would say it's probably like 2 to 3 days a week is when I take it. I almost inevitably see that correlation. So what's going on there? Like, why am I experiencing that kind of like good cognitive boost and brain functioning, able to kind of like dive into deep work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is like the dreaded last 2 hours of most people's work? What's going on there? Explain a little bit.
Yeah. I think a few things are happening. So my prediction number 1 is that you drink coffee in the morning.
I do pretty early, and I only do 1 to 2 cups. And that's again, like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. generally. I'm an early morning riser.
So I think part of that 3 p.m. crash is still that meal. So even if you eat a ketogenic diet, you're still going to get a blood glucose increase and an insulin spike. And it's going to, now it's not making you crash as fast as other people that eat at 12. They finish at 1 and then 2 o'clock, they're taking a siesta, napping.
Oh, yeah.
So yours is a little bit slower, but I think it's partly that. I think it's partly the caffeine coming down, even from the 7 a.m. What goes up has to come down.
Yeah.
So when is it going to come down? It's not going to come down at 12 because you just ate, so you got a little bit of a pop. So it's coming down at 3. And then there's the sundowning effect, which happens to some elderly people where the brain just stops being able to use the glucose. It's just, I don't understand it. I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, but it's the sundowning effect where this brain energy gap, the brain just isn't able to use glucose, and the ketones help that. So a quick story, a CEO who, I was good friends with, he said, oh, I don't need ketones. I'm always mentally sharp. I'm great. And then I find out that he doesn't. I tried to schedule an appointment with him at 2 or 3 p.m. He said, oh, no, I only do my appointments in the morning. I'm like, why? Oh, that's the sharpest. Okay, talk me through that. Well, at 12 o'clock, I don't eat breakfast, so I'm sharp all morning. I have coffee, sharp all morning. I eat lunch, and then I never schedule appointments in the afternoon because I'm just mentally not there. I'm like, you didn't tell me that. He's like, why? Do you think ketones help with that? I'm like, yeah. So what we did was we took the KE1, which is our other drink that tastes a lot better, 6 times more water, and it's a mix of ketone ester, ketone salt, and ketone-free acid, only the D form. So all in all, it has 90% less total salt load than the racemic salts. So people sometimes equate ketone salts as being bad. It's not necessarily they're bad, it's just the salt load's huge. But if you mix it with the ketone ester, it tastes good. So he took just like $1 or $2 worth of this ketone mix at 12 o'clock. He skipped lunch. And then he took a little bit more at 2 or 3 p.m. And before you know it, he just didn't eat lunch, didn't have that crash, and then suddenly doubled his productivity of the day.
Incredible.
He's now able to schedule his meetings. So he didn't get the spike, he didn't get the crash, and then before you know it, it's dinner time, and he didn't find himself eating an absurd amount, to make up for lunch and breakfast. And he lost weight. We don't recommend it for losing weight, but he thinks it's a weight loss thing because he's like, now I'm not eating lunch. Eating lunch was weight, not the ketones, but the not eating lunch.
Right.
Some people take the drink and then they literally eat lunch right afterward. And I said, were you hungry? No. Well, how did you expect it to help you lose
It's purely
weight?
habitual. Right. Yeah. That's super interesting.
So,
I've
yeah.
met so many people in the corporate world that do that. Like they won't schedule meetings in the afternoon. And I would say that, prior to me kind of like changing a lot of my lifestyle, I would say, especially when I was a student and then when I was a resident and working like insane hours and then just like stress to the max. Yeah, like afternoons would kill me after I would eat. And then I kind of made the switch, to more of a lower carb lifestyle. Now I mentioned that I was paleo first and then kind of went more ketogenic, low carb. And then I just found that my ability, especially when I combined that with fasting and then added on, additional exogenous ketone esters, like the ability to kind of rock out the last like half of the day, like significantly enhanced. And I wasn't afraid to have meetings or schedule podcasts because I used to never schedule podcasts in the afternoon because I would be like, no, I'm dead. And so now I can do that. And so, yeah, time is money. So I'm able to kind of produce more, which is a good thing. So yeah, that's super interesting. So like if you had somebody, let's say that was like, I really do have just like that absolute insane, like brain fog in the afternoon, like postprandial lunchtime. It's just like, boom, 2:00, no good to go. Like what's kind of the suggestions from a protocol? We kind of talked about a little bit about the caffeine intake, but what's some suggestions on like how they might be able to supplement with some exogenous ketones or kind of factor in some contextual lifestyle changes in order to kind of have that boosting benefit?
Well, you could try to lower the glucose spike in your lunchtime by making it a little bit lower carb or adding fat to it. So I like not MCT oil, but just regular liquid coconut oil or a tablespoon of olive oil. And people say, oh, well, I cook with it. No, don't count the stuff that you cook with because that properties change. After you're done with the meal, after you're done making the meal, add the oil. So you're just changing the ratio of the meal, the percentage of fat and carbs and protein. But they could. Some people will take between 5 and 15 mLs. More is not necessarily better. Some people will take it every couple hours. We know some stockbrokers that will have a little measuring tube and just sip on it every couple of hours, and they'd rather have that steady amount as opposed to if you take too much. For some people, it can lower their blood sugar too much and make them lightheaded. So that can be bad. So then they spread it out. But I would look at the caffeine because one of the drinks we're working on, maybe it'll come out next year. It's called Skip It Ketone Coffee.
Nice.
And the idea is to skip breakfast, skip sugar, skip fats. People say, but fat's great. What's better than fat? No fat. Like not having the calories is actually better. Fast better than fat. It just fat helps you, not have carb. Taking something like ketones instead of the caffeine, it's not a stimulant, but it will give you that same, a similar pickup without that crash. But this drink one day will help. We're only going to sell it in decaf form. So to help people get off of their caffeine addictions. And caffeine is a drug. I know a lot of doctors say, oh, if you have one or two, it's good or fine. Or there's some study that showed that coffee drinkers live longer. I actually read the study. In the fine print, it said there was no difference between those that drank decaf versus caffeinated. And I was like, well, are we talking about caffeine or are we talking about the coffee bean?
So I'm talking about the polyphenols, the antioxidant properties. I mean, those.
So if I would suggest you try a 30, it might even be 45 days of cutting your caffeine completely to 100%.
People are going to come at you with pitchforks now, Frank.
I know, but use the ketones to help substitute, and help with that withdrawal. So one lady said, oh, the ketones didn't help for me at all. And I said, okay, let's walk through it. She normally drinks 2 cups of coffee. And I said, well, what happens when you normally don't drink 2 cups? Oh, I am irritable. I've got brain fog. I've got a headache, all these symptoms. I said, and what happened when you took ketone ester instead of the caffeine? Oh, I felt nothing. I'm like, well, nothing is good. You didn't feel all those withdrawals. You just felt normal. It just brought you back up. But the caffeine, there's a great book. I think it's $2 on Kindle, like Quit Caffeine. And it talks about this misnomer that you think that it gives you energy, but it's more a withdrawal effect. That ketones worked for me. Sorry, the caffeine worked for me 5 years ago when I first did the buttered coffee, bulletproof coffee. It worked great for 2 weeks, but then it stopped working. Well, what happened? I got overclocked, but then now it was just a withdrawal symptom. I was just going down to 80, 90%, waking up groggy, and then taking caffeine to kind of just bring me back up to baseline. If you break that habit and you actually don't have caffeine in your system at all, even that 1 to 2 cups, you'll find I actually have that energy naturally. So it's this misnomer. You think that you're getting a boost, but you're not. You're actually normally there. And initially I cut coffee completely, and I would just use it once every 2 weeks selectively for, a important business meeting. So I'd only take it once every 2 weeks. And so I'd be, then I really feel it then. But then eventually, for some reason, COVID, I didn't have any important meeting for 2 or 3 months. So I didn't realize it. And I was like, wow, I actually have the energy all day long. Like, even if I had an important meeting right now, I would not want to overclock. I'm good. So even removing that intermittent, like once every 2 weeks thing, and just going cold turkey over to decaf, so you still have the ritual. Oh, I love my coffee. Great, go have your coffee, but have decaf, and you might find a benefit.
Yeah, people get so nervous because they number one, they become dependent on it because their physiology has been changed because of the amount. And most people just drink most people, especially in America, like we're not just drinking like 1 cup of coffee. It's like an entire freaking pot of coffee that people are drinking. And people don't realize just how inherently they are changing their physiology. And they think that, they think, number one, like I'm addicted to this. Well, number one, you are addicted to it. Number two, they think that if I try to remove it, then it's just going to like ruin the rest of my day. I'm not going to be able to function. And it probably is going to significantly impact you for the first few days that you come off of it because, well, what are you having? Well, you're detoxing. You're having withdrawals from it just because, like you mentioned, it is a drug. And just like with any good drug that you're addicted to, you're going to have those withdrawal symptoms. But after you get over the hump, you're going to really, really experience that you don't need it. And I will give you kind of my prime example. When I was a resident, I was having some of these weird, like skipped ectopic beats of the heart, and it come to find out I was just way too caffeinated, and I didn't. It is not. It is not. And as a resident, working in a hospital so many hours of the week, one of the things that I found is that like every resident that I worked with, we relied on religiously on coffee all throughout the day. And it doesn't matter if we're there till, 10, 11 o'clock at night, like we're sipping coffee all day long. And I was having like these skipped abnormal heartbeats. And then my physician just said like, dude, like you are, number one, you're stressed out of the max. You're not living kind of a great lifestyle as a resident. And then also too, like you are drinking way too much caffeine. So I really worked on my stress response alongside with I completely cut caffeine out. And those first like 2 days were hard. Like they were rough.
The ketones will help with that. So the ketones can't.
I wish I would have known that back then. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. But now if someone's there is a solution to help them with those withdrawals. But this one lady who was a 1-star review on Amazon, and she's like, oh, it didn't work for me. I felt nothing. Come to find out, she was on a 10 cup of coffee a day.
Oh, goodness.
It's going to be the ketone ester might not be able to overcome the withdrawals. She didn't have the withdrawals, but she didn't have the energy level that she had before. And I said,
right,
hey, 10 cups, maybe you don't, I don't know, maybe you don't go cold turkey. Maybe you slowly wean it down, but the ketones won't be able to overcome that level.
Yeah, that's just slightly excessive. 10 cups. And it's probably like 10 ounce or 8 ounce cups of coffee, not like, a 6 ounce.
It was 1,000 milligrams. She said it was 1,000 milligrams of caffeine a day. And I looked it up, and, average cup is 100. And I was like, that's 10 cups. And, but even people that take it in the morning, I still think it affects your sleep. People might, say, oh, I stopped taking it at 12 because after 12, it really wrecks my sleep. But even before, it can give you that 2 a.m. cortisol spike that wakes you up at 2 a.m. and you're just up for 2 hours and you can't get back to sleep. So yeah, that'd be one of my biggest tips is finding a way to, I know it's, and everyone's so pro caffeine. Somehow that drug, oh, it's natural. Well, so is cocaine. Cocaine's natural. And people aren't like, oh, use this, pick me up. It's I don't know if it's equally as addictive, but it's very addictive. It's not good for you. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.